What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Halftime with K Bizzy, and today we have a very cool guest, as promised from last week's episode with Striker from HLTV, the editor-in-chief. We have a senior writer that some of you guys probably know very well from HLTV. We have Nohte joining us today. We talk about pretty much everything involved with his come up in the space and what he's been a part of so far, and some early stuff that, you know, kind of helped put him on the map and kind of help, you know, pave his way in the scene and start to create a name for himself. It was a really great episode, and I think you guys are going to enjoy it. As always, make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube and you enjoyed today's podcast. And definitely check out the description below if you want to see some of our merch that we have on our Etsy shop. The intro this week is short and sweet. We're going to get right into things. We'll catch you guys on the outro. Hey, how's it going, man?
Pretty well, and you?
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you. Wow, yeah, so pretty interesting day for an ACS. Didn't see that coming from Liquid.
Yeah, I mean, I was almost ready for them to be eliminated at this point.
Yes, I mean, I'm a FaZe fan. Like, that's my number one team personally, so I know all about the you know, the copium, like, oh, they got it this time, and you know, never delivers almost.
No, I think Liquid are in dire straits right now, honestly.
Yeah,
They
for sure.
they need changes.
Yeah. But hey, dude, I gotta thank you big time for I know we were just talking about it the other day, about the whole, you know, the Grim announcement on HLTV. You brought it up to Drake and landed myself in my first HLTV article. That's a huge accomplishment, so I can't thank you enough for pointing
Yeah,
that
of
out.
course.
That was
Of course.
great,
I
man.
mean, you had the scoop, so gotta credit where it is, you know.
Dude, I was not expecting him to just drop that. I was just like kind of putting the feelers out because the day before we recorded, there was all these rumors coming out about Grim possibly going back to North America with NRG and stuff, and I was just like, you know, like, what do you think you could talk about? And he's just like, I don't care. Yeah, he's, you know, we poached him, and George is gone. I was like, fuck, okay, cool.
Yeah, Dubs is the kind of guy to kind of just drop that kind of stuff. He doesn't care as much about, official announcements or making it, you know, if there's something happening, he'll kind of say it if it's not a big deal.
For sure. No, it was. I just got to thank you again. Now that we're actually talking, I appreciate it a ton.
Yeah, of course. And thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, thank you for wanting to come on. Did you have any questions about kind of how anything goes, or just kind of jump right into it?
I don't think so. I think I watched a couple of your videos, so I think it's just usual questions, right? It's
Yeah,
always weird being on the other end of the questions. So
yeah. No, I'm excited, man. Let's talk about the most important question. Why any of us are even here in the space? How did you get into Counter Strike?
yeah, so I mean, mine's a little strange because I mean, as you might know, CS isn't huge in North America, especially Canada, Vancouver. Like it's not the biggest game, especially with us. I feel like it's always console games growing up,
A
and in
hundred
terms
percent.
of all of my friends were always playing on console, but I was always into PC gaming, and yeah, for me, I never really touched Counter Strike. I knew of it. I think I'd played a couple of um, games, not even comp games. I think I booted up CS Source or something at some point, and it was some op map or something, and I was so confused about what was going on because obviously you have no idea, um, especially if you don't actually know that community servers aren't actually any official game mode or whatever. So I was like, okay, like people are just destroying me with the op and in these random maps that have all these levels and ladders, and the maps were blocky, like gray boxes and everything. So I was like, okay, this is a weird game, and I don't think I ever touched it after that.
Oh wow.
Um, but yeah, then I used to play a lot of Call of Duty, and there was a YouTuber who started making just funny videos of playing CS with his friends back in like 2014, 2015. And I started watching those, and I was like, oh, this game actually looks kind of fun. Like there is something to it, And yeah, when I saw that, I think I started watching a tournament or two. I caught the start, I basically started watching around the start of 2015. And yeah, I think Cologne was obviously a big tournament at that point when I to bring me into, you know, loving CS and getting my interest in. And yeah, from there uh, I downloaded CS, but back then I also didn't have a gaming PC, so I was sitting on my laptop,
Haha.
connected to an external monitor,
Oh,
and it was
wow.
really janky because I think I didn't have an external keyboard either, so I think I was still using like the laptop uh, keyboard, and yeah, I think I just started playing for fun. It was super super janky, and I actually really enjoyed it. And then I just kind of kept watching CS from there. Back then, obviously, CS:GO Lounge was a big thing, so there was people betting on games, and I had like I think I had like a free skin drop I got, and I actually did pretty well from betting on games from CS:GO Lounge using skins. So obviously, that's not something that happens nowadays.
Yeah,
In terms of just even having sites like that around anymore. It's a lot more regulated, which obviously it should be.
for
But
sure.
that obviously piqued my interest a bit because I had these stakes on these completely random matches too. You know, like you're looking at CS:GO Lounge, and back then it had like the most random online matches you could think of, and it
Yeah.
was just like, okay, what am I even watching here? Um, but yeah, that definitely piqued my interest at first. And um, back then, HLTV also used to write these event previews, right? So you would go on HLTV, and it was this big thing where before big events, they would have all these storylines for all the events that were happening. So each time there was a big LAN coming up, they would kind of outline what was going on, and that helped me follow it. Uh, but I also kind of looked at those articles and I was like, oh, like these are kind of fun to write because I was betting with a couple of friends. So I was like, oh, I'd already started kind of writing, you know, um, like veto previews of how some of the big series would go, like what teams would pick what. This is back before, you had some of the more analytical tools you have now before map picks was such a kind of now I think you can go into a series and usually know what teams are going to end up picking, but back then it was not as established, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, I would kind of do that, and I'd start writing for some of my friends for just what I thought would happen in the match. And back then there was also this website called Gamers where anybody could, write an article and submit it to
Oh, wow.
the editorial team to get published. And in a sense, they were getting free content from anybody. Like anybody could submit it. So in a way, it was kind of smart from them because they could get free writing from people, but also they did have a team of editors who would like review it before publishing. So I started writing a couple of storyline kind of pieces. I think one was about Nico, one was about Astralis. Um, and from that, I started reaching out to a few people and seeing, where I could help out. So I think I started editing for a guy named Xenon who worked for Unicorn, and then Dralon. So uh, yeah, basically from there it was kind of, I know I'm going more into the career side than the CS side, but it was kind of like that kind of brought me into the esports side and understanding where everything goes from there. Um, but yeah, I mean, the whole time I was also playing CS. Like I fell in love with the game in terms of just there's so much to learn,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I really like that. And I think I also really like the competitive side of things. Once I realized, it's not just gray box op 1v1 maps.
Yeah. It's weird because like I feel like most people have the same kind of like um interaction with Counter-Strike when they first find it. I mean, I can only relate to Global Offensive because that's the first iteration of Counter-Strike that I played, but it doesn't really tell you anything. You pop
Yeah,
in and you're in the menu and then it's like, okay, there's a couple game modes. Let's see what this one's about. And, you just kind of have to figure it out. And especially on a laptop, like a number of like so many people, including myself too, started out on a laptop. Hopefully you get 60 FPS in your fucking 5v5 game, and deathmatch was a write off. You couldn't even really do that. Um,
yeah,
and then, once you finally get like a good computer, I feel like it just kind of makes you like lock in even more. You're just like even more hooked because now you can properly play. You can angle your keyboard. You don't have to T-Rex arm on your on your laptop and stuff. And then just the scene overall since, let's just look back to like 2014, like it's changed so much for the better too. And I think it's, the ceiling is just continuing to raise, and it's really cool to see how it's blossomed.
Yeah, it's blown up a lot, especially I mean, back then there was also a lot of events that weren't as easy to follow as it is now. I mean, in the sense of there's a lot of events now, but I think it is more outlined as, the top teams are getting invited to these events and it's a little easier to follow. Whereas back then there was not as many, I guess, uh, not as much content from the broadcast side of it itself that helped you follow it. And then once analyst desk started really becoming a bit more interesting in like 2015, I think that helped establish that as well.
For sure. And I'm curious, I know you were kind of talking a little bit about the journalism side, working with Gamer and stuff like that. But did you have, before any of that happened, did you have any type of like prior journalism or like article writing or nothing at all?
No, nothing. I was just always really good at English in school. I also just really enjoyed writing in school. I um, kind of just had a affinity for it, I guess. And I think when I came into CS and I saw those articles, I was like, okay, this is kind of fun. Like, this is definitely something I can take an interest in and kind of explore that route uh, of things. And it was also hard because, in a sense, back then as well, when I started writing, it was definitely like completely out of a passion for the game, and I didn't have any thought as to like how people will receive it. Whereas once you start working for HLTV and you have more eyes on it, there's always a bit more. I wouldn't say it's not like I didn't put thought into what I was writing back then, but you also have to keep in mind, like if you get something wrong and you publish it
Oh yeah.
in terms of just even if you're writing about the game and you say like, oh, this was a mistake and that a player made. If you're wrong, then
You're getting
you're gonna
attacked.
get you're gonna get shit for it.
And that's the one thing I always like. I have a massive amount of respect for you guys because I mean, you could just go boot up a game of competitive, not even Premier, just comp. And let's say you're in a clutch situation, 1v3 for argument's sake. If you make one wrong mistake, there's got to be like a 75% chance that you're going to hear some shit from someone. So when you scope out and you look at the entire Counter-Strike community and for everybody that follows HLTV, like if you're to make one tiny little mistake on an article, like the world's over. The world's gonna blow up. So, I give a lot of credit to you guys that have a lot of respect for you guys that do that because it's not easy to deal with backlash. I'm not sure if you've ever had to deal with it yourself. I feel
Yeah,
like
yeah,
we
no,
all
for
have
sure.
to an extent,
Yeah,
but it's the CS community can be pretty damn pretty damn brutal.
yeah, yeah. And I was watching your one with Prof, and I think you touched on similar things as well. But like at some point, you also have to not put your energy into it, right? You can't.
Yeah.
There's only so much attention you can give to it. Um, but yeah, I guess to kind of answer a little more on your question, I didn't necessarily start only as a writer. So back then, I was like working full time, and then I was also um, I started writing those couple of articles for gamers, and I got spotted by Joe Cardali, who, in a way, is like the godfather of NACS in terms of the HLTV coverage side of things, and he started Dust 2 US. So when he was starting Dust 2 US, he saw those articles and he offered to bring me on as a writer, and that was like the first time I actually got to work directly in the space in a sense of being consistent and getting to talk to bigger names because we launched with interviews with like Moses and with a couple of players, and that was my first actual experience getting in touch with any players or personalities to do those kind of things, and yeah, so back then when he started Dust 2, the launch of it actually got delayed by about 3 months from when they initially planned. And during that time, there was a coverage admin role that opened up at HLTV. And basically, for people who don't know, there's an entire team of people who are, adding the events and then adding all the matches, keeping track of the scores. There's like a score bot that you have to connect in the back end, and then updating like the halftime scores and processing the stats and updating the match times and setting the player lineups. So there's like all of that work that happens behind the scenes. So that actually kind of became more of my main job for a long time. So from the end of 2017 till 2019, that was kind of like the main thing. And working for Dusty US, which is owned by HLTV, that was kind of on top of all of that. And I obviously preferred that side of things, but there's only so much you can do to kind of balance all of the work, right? Um, so yeah, it was kind of a lucky break in that sense that Joe saw those articles that I was writing and he decided to bring me on to Dust to US and give me that chance. So I mean, without that, I don't know where I would be. So
That's
obviously very grateful to him.
For sure, that's crazy. And the whole aspect of like this is something that I've been learning the past 2 years I've been doing this show is like when you get to meet, some of these people in the industry, like, obviously virtually, sometimes in person, depending if you're going to events and whatnot. It's kind of crazy. Like, some of these people have massive names, and maybe at the time that you're meeting them or talking to them or whatever, you might not be established or anything, so you could just be like a talking head. So I'm curious to hear your like aspect of like who were some of the first people that you got to meet in the scene, and did you ever have like a holy shit moment, like how the hell am I here? It's a crazy feeling.
Yeah, actually, so I had a really interesting first experience because basically what happened is I was writing for Dust US, and back then we didn't really initially go to too many events. Um, and I got a chance to go to DreamHack, or sorry, not DreamHack one more time, Zotac Cup Americas Finals. So that was an event held out of in California, and I'm in Vancouver, so they flew me down for that, and it was this little surreal experience because I'd never been to an event before. I'd also never met any of the players or anyone, and I got to this event and there's no like media day. There's no. It was pretty informal in that sense. So I got there and I got like a VIP badge. So it wasn't like a media press badge or anything. And the day I got there was I think before the event actually started. And so I'm in this venue and I see like Stanislav and Shazam practicing or something. And I was like, oh, like, do I talk to them? Do I try and get an interview? Like, they were obviously like in a game. And so I think I did end up getting an interview or two from them, but I was still a little bit nervous and confused about, where to go, what to do. And there was this upstairs area in the venue where there's like the VIP area that had some like snacks and drinks. And then there was a curtain and then a bunch of practice setups on the other side of that. And I was a little lost in terms of where I should go. What I like, you could tell if you looked at me. It was I was a little bit of a deer in the headlights. And Furia were there. That was their first, I think their first international event actually when they'd just moved to North America. And they were all practicing up in those PCs. And Gehi, who's the old coach of Furia, saw me and he was like, "Oh, just come sit with us." Like,
Oh wow.
and obviously, I think back then Art spoke English and Gehi spoke English, but I don't think any of the other players spoke English, if I'm remembering right. And I think K obviously spoke a little bit. And so he was like, "Yeah, just come sit with us." So I actually just sat next to them, and he was talking to me for like an hour, 2 hours. We just that really, I think, helped uh, kind of bridge that gap of, oh, like these are just people who love the game who are sitting here and talking and have that kind of experience to come into my first LAN and have this team of players who are very clearly something back then already and just pull me in as if I was a longtime friend or somebody that they knew because I was just this random guy who they didn't know. They just pulled me in and let me talk to them for like 2 hours, just sitting there watching them practice. So that was really cool. Uh, that definitely helped shed off a lot of the nerves for that event, and yeah, that was definitely helped me bridge that gap of being nervous or anything. Because after that, I think I was a lot more uh, comfortable talking to a lot of the players and whatnot.
For sure. And I'm sure it happens to them too, right? Like we all start somewhere, and to enter an industry like this, I mean, there's thousands of people that that are notable, and you know what I mean? To be the guy that stands out, especially when you're on the come up and trying to make your break in the scene, it's you can't really just it's not as easy as just walking into a room and just being like, "Hey everybody, here I am and it's nice to meet you all." So, as a player too, especially like, a rookie or something, everyone starts somewhere and you might not be well known or something. So sometimes it just takes that person to be like, "Hey, come over here, hang out with us," and yeah, that's really cool to hear that.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, also, I didn't mention, but Jamie, who's the CEO of Furio, was also there. Very same, uh, kind of the same experience where it was him and Gay just taking me under their wing, talking to me, letting me hang out. So yeah.
That's wicked. Uh, so early on in your career, you would go on to cover stories about unpaid salaries, and I know that was kind of a big, thing that happened in your early career. So I was kind of wondering if you could break that whole thing down for me and kind of just expand on that whole event, if you want to call it that scenario.
Yes. So it was a interesting period because as I said, I didn't have journalism experience in that sense. I had just been writing, and when Joe brought me into Dust 2 US, he kind of really showed everyone and set this like editorial standard as to how we should approach things. And as well for me, like I didn't want to start doing that type of journalism stuff without knowing what I was doing and knowing what the correct way to actually approach a lot of those things was. So I did my own research a little bit in terms of how I should conduct myself, and also Joe helped a lot in terms of telling us, like you can't publish this without reaching out to someone. You have to like get these 2 3 sources, make sure everything's like double triple checked. um, so that was really interesting because without that, I think it would have been really hard to kind of go into the investigative side of things, and that was something that I really started exploring at Dust 2. Um, and yeah, so with that, obviously back then there was a lot uh, more happening in NA in the sense of a lot more small organizations that were uh, in CS that would kind of do things that you would have to check in on. Like, there's this whole ASIO Team House situation that Maui Snake could definitely tell you a lot about. And yeah, so back then it was basically trying to make sure that these players were also being treated well. We would have players reach out to us, saying like something's happening, or we would see something, whether it be, on Twitter or whether it be through private channels, and then we would kind of dig into that and yeah, so a lot of it, or Joe would hear about something and tell us to start looking into it. So a lot of it was kind of reaching out about those kind of things and making sure um, we got the direct information or the facts from enough people to be able to put things out. And yeah, when it comes to like the unpaid salaries that were happening, I mean, obviously that's stuff that needs to be flagged
For
and
sure.
and brought to attention, especially if it's been going on for a long time. So yeah, I think everyone has a bit of a duty in terms of the journalism side to be able to put that to light.
For sure. And for something such as unpaid salaries, that's a pretty big, that's a big headline. So, the first thing I think of when I hear about that is like, what did you face when dealing with that? Like, did you have people hitting you up like, hey, stop fucking covering this and stop, talking about us like this? Like, obviously, this was a true thing. It's not like you were just making this up and putting it on a massive platform to spread misinformation. Like, what did you ever have any kind of like blowback on that situation that you kind of had to deal with?
I wouldn't say any blowback. I mean, you'll always have times where you reach out to, organizations about that thing, and more often than not, if salaries are unpaid and you're reaching out to an org, they'll either ghost you or they'll deny it, which is why, as I said, it's really important to have multiple sources that corroborate that, because more likely than not, you're just gonna get lied to as if that's, not happening, when you have to double and triple and quadruple check from as many people as you can. So I wouldn't say blowback in that sense, but there's definitely times where you'll reach out and you'll just get a lie back.
Yeah. And how do you debunk if it's a lie? Like, do you just start reaching out to players or other staff members and being like, "Hey, like, can you be honest with me? Is this actually happening here?"
Yeah, so I mean it's definitely situational, but in those senses, you would get either screenshots, or you'd get direct information from people about, this is owed, or maybe even like a TO was supposed to pay prize pool to a team, but then the team boss withheld that, but then they're lying about the prize pool not being put and not being paid out. So you're checking with like the TO, you're checking with the players, you're kind of making sure that everything's corroborated and you're getting enough. And in those situations as well, the players are probably sending, uh, you know, information, or it's like staff, or it's even sometimes like people who aren't directly connected to to the situation itself who have heard from other people. And so that's when you have, secondary sources telling you something, then you have to you have to check again with primary sources to make sure that's all correct. So it is a lot of like
Sticky
making sure you
situation.
have the right information, right? Yeah.
Holy. So, what's the biggest misconception people have about investigative journalism, and what do you think more people in the community should be aware of when it comes to what it is that you do for your career?
Yeah. So I think we're in a bit of an age of Twitter journalism. As I'm sure you've seen, there's a lot of people, will leak stuff, uh, and it either won't be true or they're kind of taking a shot in the dark based on random information that they're seeing. So I think a lot of people have started confusing that as journalism when it's absolutely not. And I think uh, I also err on the side of caution as to like how far I would say I'm an investigative journalist, because I think that was definitely something I did a lot more at Dust 2 and initially when I was at HLTV. I think I've moved a little bit away from that because obviously we have Louise who does fantastic work, Mira, and he also taught me a lot when I came to HLTV about like how to dig into those things and what to do. But I think in terms of where my focus is, I wouldn't say it's as much on the investigative side now. Um, but it's definitely something I still enjoy doing and having dabbling in rather than being my primary focus.
For sure. I just think the whole part of like, being the guy to piece like what is it like the FBI like you'll see in like crime shows where they have like the big picture board with all of the people and the lines are going to it. You're kind of like piecing everything together. Like that must be such a thrill when you get to do that or when you did get to do that once upon a time.
Yeah, it's definitely there's an element of fun to it, but there's also an element of, a lot of the time you're looking into things that people are trying to hide or people are trying to lie about. So it is a bit hard to. I think there's always a little bit of uh, I wouldn't say fear, because usually once you're publishing something, you're very confident in it. But there's always a little bit of you that when you publish anything investigative where you're talking about, something that's sensitive, it's like, oh, like, am I wrong on this? How rough could this really be? But once you're publishing something like that, it's really important to obviously be correct and to not publish until you have all that information.
For sure. And you guys do have like a massive team of people that, probably goes through X amount of stages. It's not just like, I could only imagine it's just like a bunch of people checking it rather than just one person typing stuff up and then sending it off, right?
Yeah, I mean, it would depend on the story, obviously, but I think especially back then for me, it would always go through Joe. So or there would be like two to three of us who would gather the information, depending on what the story was, and then it would go to Joe when I was at Dust Two or Louise at HLTV, and now obviously it's Striker and or Louise, but it definitely depends on what is being written. I wouldn't say there's like 10 people or 5 people that it goes through,
Yeah.
but usually if you're investigating something, it's kind of like on you to have all of your information and sources and verify that it's all correct, and then it does end up going through someone at the end. Yeah.
Okay. Absolutely. So I would have to imagine that being a fan of Counter-Strike esports and also having a career in the Counter-Strike esports industry is pretty hard. I work full time, 8 hours a day. I have my weekends off, and I try to watch as much Counter-Strike as I can. I make videos on my main channel, and I do the podcast and I stream. Like I do a lot of stuff. Then I think about, a guy like you who, you're a journalist and your whole job revolves around watching Counter-Strike, which is fucking awesome, like really cool. But with everything that happens in the scene, I was just talking to Striker about it on last week's podcast. The industry doesn't like you don't get to breathe. There's like a
Yeah.
couple times a year where things are okay, let's chill for a little bit. Right after the majors is usually the only downtime, and that's only for a short period of time. How the hell do you guys keep up with, everything that's going on and making sure you're covering as much as you can in the space? Because I I think it's insane. Like I know you guys are a massive team and everything, but with how much goes on, it's impeccable. It's remarkable, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely is something you have to be wholly invested in. Like you have to love it to be able to follow it to the degree that you need to be that in tune with it. And I think especially when I was first getting into CS and into writing and when I was at Dust 2, that was like I was very similar. Like I was working full time and then I was doing the HLTV coverage job and I was doing the Dust 2 US writing job. And I did that for 2 years. And at the end of that 2 years, I was like, okay, I can't do all of this together with the amount of attention that and time that it needs. So that was actually when I got a raise for the coverage job and I went full time into HLTV. So to that point, you do need a lot of time to focus, and I think I have had the thought of like I would be really interested to know how it feels to be a fan who doesn't follow it so closely and have that experience where like you go to an event and you don't actually know all of the storylines and you don't know every piece of news. But yeah, when you're working in the space, you really do have to be in tune with that all the time. And it's funny because like my whenever I'm on like vacation, my Discord notifications are still on. Like I'm still getting all the news. I'm still waking up and I'm like reading my news chat to make sure that when I come back in 3 days that I don't have to, figure out everything that's going on in one go. So obviously like everything's still moving and there's a lot happening all the time. So staying in tune with it is definitely like you are always on in a way. And I think for a long time that was a little harder to or not harder, sorry, it was a little bit um I'd say it wasn't too much, but it was a lot to kind of pay attention to all the time. And then at some point when we started doing actual like shifts at HLTV, I think that helped a lot in terms of being able to know when I could, be on or off. Um but yeah, even then, like I still am almost always connected to like what's happening. And yeah, I think I've only just started when I go on vacation to like mute Discord entirely
Yeah.
and not try and look at stuff. But I mean, I'll still look at HLTV to see like if I'm on vacation and events happening, I'm still like if I wake up, I'm like eating breakfast, nothing else is happening. I'll like put on the game. My girlfriend will be like, "Why? Like, are you working right now?" I'm like, "No, I'm just watching the game." Like, yeah,
It's really cool, but I couldn't imagine, like I find it hard sometimes doing what I do on a regular basis and keeping up with, having EPL up on my other monitor for, argument's sake, since it's happening at the time we're recording this. Um and doing my thing on my main monitor and doing something over on that one and then doing what I have to do around the house and going to work, and like that's a lot. But like you guys have sources that you talk to, and like there's 100,000 times more that you guys have to do. So I could only imagine what it's like actually having to be, in your shoes.
yeah. I mean, also I can't complain though. Like
No, for sure.
I get to watch a video game and write about video game, travel to events for a living. There's really nothing better. It's at some point it is a job, but at the same time, it's something that I love so much that it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah. It's just your passion and you're just getting compensated for it. And, you get to experience so many cool things.
Yeah. And I mean, it's also like I've been it's something that I will always be grateful for is the ability to like travel and see places because like I've been to a lot of events at this point. Obviously, not as many as like Striker or Prof who were working back in the day when there would be an event every weekend in a different country and
Yeah.
you'd be going to a lot of these random places. Like now it's a bit more of a consistent thing where you go to very similar places every year. But I think back then, you'd get to go to like Mykonos or these places that were a little bit more uh, out of the ordinary nowadays. So I think, yeah, something I'll always be grateful is for the ability to travel to like a lot of these places where I obviously would have never gone or never would have put on my lists of places to travel to if not for HLTV.
And dude, just to meet like people from the community and just it's I've always been kind of like an introverted guy for the most part. Like I'm not like if I've been to a couple parties. The first party I went to, I was on the couch staring at the wall, ready to leave. I've never been like a people kind of person, but like, I went to the Austin major, and it was, I don't know what happened. It just, something was brought out of me, and it was, you could just point at someone, go walk up to them, and just talk, and it was like, you just know them. Like, as toxic as Counter Strike may be, like, it's really a cool place when you find the right people, or you go to an event and people are just happy to be there, and you just, the natural conversation just comes up. It's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'd definitely say that I was more introverted back before. Uh, I wouldn't say before I started going to events, but definitely more introverted uh, back in those times. And I was really surprised after, going to events and not really feeling any need to be introverted or any
Yeah,
desire to like be closed off, because I think it's just really cool talking to a lot of people who share the same passion. And like everyone I've met whenever I go to events, it's just always really cool, really fun to talk to.
absolutely. So 2026 is already off to a really interesting start. I've said it a couple times before, and I don't mean to hate on them, but I'm really sick of this vitality era right now. I think it just gets a little bit boring, just seeing the same result or the same playoffs over and over. Then you think of like teams like Paravision and teams like Foot, the really, really shaking things up, really keeping it interesting. G2 is having their moments and then falling off. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's happening. 100 Thieves re-enters the scene, sorry, and they're like, I think they cracked top 30, or they're just outside of top 30, if
Yeah,
I'm not
I think they
mistaken.
cracked top 30 briefly. I'm not sure if they're back there right now, but yeah, they definitely were before their Draculine result and
Mhm.
Draculine. They're 36 right now, yeah, so pretty
Okay.
close.
It's pretty amazing overall, but I
Mhm.
just think that the season started out really good, and I think that we could be in for a really interesting 2026. I'm kind of just curious to hear your personal thoughts on what you think is going to happen, with teams, with players specifically, anything. I'm just curious. I want to pick your brain at that.
Yeah, it's funny you say that you're a little bored with this whole Vitality era. Were you watching CS much during the Astralis period?
I was really involved in skateboarding. I had like a skateboard company that I was doing, so I was really out at the skate parks and out in the streets a lot. So I was like here and there. I would say back when I got into CS, maybe 2015, 2016, 2017, I was like more, involved in that. So I would only get bits and pieces of Astralis, but I remember everyone was talking about them. It sounds like it's pretty similar with what Vitality's doing right now.
Yeah, so it's funny because I never feel bored during these kind of era periods, because I just really like watching good CS. Was never really like a fan of any particular team or player back, even when I watched before I started working in the space, and that still rings true today, in the sense of I just really like watching you know good good teams play really well.
Like
And
quality
that
Counter
was,
Strike.
yeah, good quality Counter Strike. And I think I really enjoy like the tactical side of the game as well. So seeing, Vitality play to the excellence that they do now and kind of mirror the dominance of the Astralis, to me, that doesn't, no part of that is not exciting, because I think watching how they play the game and how they actually get it done is just always a bit of a pleasure for me, because I think having that kind of consistency and having it for so long, like you don't see that super often. Like
No.
Astralis did it in 2019, 2018. So it doesn't happen that often. And I think there is a degree where you have to enjoy it while it's happening.
For sure.
It is fair, though, I will say, for you to say that it is boring, because I think what we were talking about before, where if you're not someone who's following the game all the time, and you're someone who tunes in for these tournaments here and there, or even if you're not even if you're following it closely but not as engrossed as someone who does it day to day, I can definitely see, tuning in for just the playoffs of events and only ever seeing Vitality win them, it can be a little bit boring. Like, you want something new,
Yeah.
but I think what is cool with the circuit now is you have teams who are going to events who are picking and choosing what events to go to. Like even right now, you have EPL where Vitality aren't there, so there is a conversation of like who can win this event while Vitality is absent. Is it going to be Mouse's time? Is it going to be Falcons' chance? Or not Falcons? They're not there either. Is it going to be Spirit? Is it going to be Spirit's time? So there is an interesting conversation to that degree, and that was something that even happened in the Astralis era, where you would have if they skipped an event, it would be a chance for another team to win that. And to me, that sets up narratives for when all those teams are at the same events where, okay, this team might have had some confidence from this trophy that they finally won. Is that actually going to be enough of a difference to now beat Vitality or beat Astralis, right? Um, yeah, I think it is interesting because compared to the start of last year, there was a lot of uncertainty about the top teams, and Mouse had just made this IGL change. Falcons didn't have Monacy yet, whereas at the start of this year, you've had a lot of these teams decide to stick with their players, and there aren't that many changes. Um, Now, whether that was necessarily a good decision, we'll see. Because I think there's a lot of people who think Falcons should make a change, or Liquid obviously are struggling right now. Maus were rumored to be looking at PR during the off season, so like a lot of these kind of things didn't actually come to fruition. So I think this first half of the year is going to be interesting to see whether those decisions actually pay off for any of these teams. Um, I think the really cool things that we can focus on, are, as you mentioned, Paravision are kind of coming up and have had that run to the final in Cluj. They won Blast Bounty. I think what will be interesting to see is if they can actually maintain that. We had this conversation on Come Here a couple of days ago as to whether they'll actually maintain that now that some teams are probably looking at them. And once you start playing against Jame, it's completely different from like watching demos. There's like a feeling
Yeah.
for the game that you get, and obviously you're seeing at EPL now, it is online, but you're seeing they're not doing quite as well. And I think over time you're going to see them fall out of that a bit. And then you also have stories like Foot, who are coming, I wouldn't say out of nowhere, but they had that whole period last year where they were in the academy program for Navi and they couldn't actually play, and now they're actually coming up. So I think there's a lot of cool storylines to still latch onto, but in that sense, there's if you're only looking at trophies, yes, the Vitality era might be a bit boring, but if you're looking at the storylines outside of that, I think there's still a lot to pull from.
Absolutely. And the whole vitality thing, the reason why I think it's boring is like I was saying, I was like besides Counter-Strike, the only thing that's really been like an addiction for me in life is skateboarding. So I I would watch we had Street League skateboarding, which was one of the biggest I was going to say tournaments, competitions for skateboarding, and it would be the same like two or three people that would win every time, and it was just like, I respect the talent so much, but it's just like, man, you just know what's gonna happen. Like, I don't know. I respect Vitality and their talent. I mean, if you deny that, I mean, you're just wrong. They're incredibly talented, and like you were saying too, when do you see eras like this? Like, it's once in a blue moon. Like, it just doesn't happen. So, they deserve all the success they're getting. I mean, nobody's able to crack them. So, until that happens, they're gonna, keep kicking ass. And I really, for the foreseeable future, who's gonna stop them? Like, I really don't. I don't see anybody. Like, I don't know. Are they just gonna ride off into the sunset? If CS2 were to die one day, Vitality will be like 60 years old, and they'll be the kings of Counter Strike still. I don't know.
I don't know. I think we'll have to see how Spirit work out with their changes and how this last bit of the season goes.
For sure. And this is super random, but on the topic, like I was talking about FaZe very briefly earlier.
Mhm.
Um, with you being the professional, the professional, um, I want to know like what are your professional thoughts on like what's going on with the team personally? Uh, it's easy to say Kerrigan is the problem. I think Brokey's inconsistency is kind of hurting the team a lot more, and you know, I don't know. Dexter's been on the bench for a while now. I don't know what's happening there. I think we need just something to freshen up the team. Maybe if we're pointing the finger toward Kerrigan, I'm not even against maybe Chopper. Like, where? let's get Chopper on a team again. I don't know. FaZe is getting an academy team. Like, I don't know. What are your thoughts on the whole thing? I'm just curious.
I'd flow down on the Chopper angle and on the Kerrigan being out. I think FaZe is. I think obviously there's a lot of different angles you can take with them. Uh, as you said, Brokey is definitely a big inconsistent point for them, and that's something that is really hard to address because when you look at the op market, it's really hard to find a replacement who isn't going to blow the bank. And FaZe just aren't a team who's spending a lot right now, as you might have been able to tell. Like even with the Twist and Elige swap, that was rumored to have happened because both teams kind of wanted it, and so there was clearly some middle ground they found in terms of the contract negotiations or whatever. Um, so yeah, the problem is that it is really hard to figure out how they would solve that. And then you also have Jacob coming in and adapting to tier one, and that's clearly difficult. And I think a lot of focus has been put on him, especially replacing someone like Rain. Um, and the way that it's happened was also interesting because there's other podcasts who have mentioned the players didn't really know uh, who was being replaced when they came in. Like Twist wasn't sure, or I think Twist said that he knew that he would be replacing Rin, but some of the other players didn't know who would be out or whatnot. So I
It's
think
crazy.
there's been uncertainty around that whole situation, right? So I think it is hard to really say where FaZe goes and where they have to find that because there's no clear solution. Like what the problems are, but there's no way to really solve it. Like Jacob needs time at tier one to adapt,
For
and
sure.
then Brokey is kind of hard to replace because he also has a pretty big voice in the team, but there's no uppers really who FaZe would be able to get at the moment, both for like buyout reasons and just in terms of availability. You mentioned Dexter, but it seems like from basically everybody who has mentioned his name, there's like visa issues or something connected to visa issues with him. So like uh, it's kind of hard to figure out where you'd land on that, right?
For sure. But I will say, like, seeing them have an academy team starting up, I think that was actually a rumor. It was in the early stages that they're starting it. I saw it this morning. I didn't have enough coffee yet, so I forget exactly the quote, but I don't want to misquote it. But it looks like they might be getting an academy team, which I think makes sense. And I've always thought that it's kind of weird that FaZe doesn't have an academy team because you see so often now that these rookies are coming out of nowhere and paving, they're making a name for themselves from the academy team to the main roster. And I think something like that could be a huge stepping stone too.
Yeah, I mean, it's also hard with academies because every time that you establish one, those players are usually really young, and it's similar. Like you'll need time to have them build up that experience to even make it into tier one, right? Like you don't just make the jump out of nowhere.
Yeah, for sure. So I got one last question and then we'll do the outro. Out of all of your articles, and I don't know how well you remember every single one of them because I know you work really hard, you do a lot. But what would be your favorite or a couple of your favorite if you couldn't put your finger on just one out of all of your work that you've done? What would you say has been your favorite piece?
That is a really hard question, actually. Um, wow, that's. Hold on one sec. Give me a sec to. I had some of my old features on a website, so I know I can look. So okay, I do. There was one I did on Grim when he really started blowing up in Triumph, and I think that one was really cool because I talked to him, I talked to Sheikh Zula, I talked to I think Junior or someone else, and it was really cool and MCE actually to get a lot of like the background of his career, and it was a pretty big write up in terms of all the information you could get about a player like that, and that was I think one of my first bigger feature articles like that for HLTV where I got to talk to that many people and kind of outline a player's career. And another big one was when I was at Dust 2 US, which was basically about how the FPL and ESEA Rank S takeover back then was basically ruining NACS. And
Oh.
back then there was a lot of prize money offered in FPL and Rank S. Like players were kind of grinding that as their main focus. Like it took away from the team play, the focus on teams and on trying to better that side of things. And especially back then, there wasn't like small NA events happening that much like there are now. There would be like the ESEA League, and then if you got to play in qualifiers, like open qualifiers, closed qualifiers, and that was sort of it. Maybe an event here and there that offered some other prize money, but it was pretty limited. And so that article basically talked about how this focus and reward for players just grinding, like a matchmaking ladder was leading to like very individual styles of play, which was kind of a known issue. And I kind of offered a solution there was face it and ESA should take the prize money that they're putting into something like that and put it into like basically like a tournament that they could organize. And Jackson from ESEA, who's now at ESL, saw that and he kind of took that and turned it into the ESEA Cash Cups. So that article kind of directly led into that. Whether it was already something they were thinking about before or not, I don't know. But in that sense, it kind of created that pipeline of creating those ESEA Cash Cups that did become a source of revenue and a focus for teams to start playing and focusing on in NA and in the U.
That's amazing, man. I love to hear it. I think all of the everybody. I said it on the last episode with Striker. But I just have so much respect for everybody involved with HLTV. Like it really is the place to go for it's like Sportsnet or like TSN or something like that for like mainstream sports. HLTV has absolutely everything, and it's just like think about the scene without it. It's much different.
Yeah, I think it would have definitely been really hard to get into if not for HLTV, even for me, like being able to see just everything that's all the matches that are coming up and all the interviews and everything. Just to have a hub for it is really, really helpful and special. And I'm obviously really, uh, as I said before, I'm really grateful to be a part of that.
Amazing, man. Well, that was the last question I have for you. For the outro, I kind of just run it the same. We actually both do our outros pretty similarly. I just like to shine the spotlight over, and just if you have any type of words, any advice, or anything at all that you want to say, the floor is yours. Have at her.
Yeah, I mean, nothing crazy or specific for me. I just want to thank you for having me on. Obviously, thanks to everyone who reads any of my content or follows HLTV or any of the interviews. I was always super grateful for that.
Alrighty, guys, that will do it for today's episode. Mega shout out to Note, Canadian brother. Always love having a fellow Canadian on the show. But that will do it for today's episode. So we will catch you guys next Friday. Have a great weekend. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And yeah, shout out to Note. Shout out to you guys. Till next time, everybody.